Hello and welcome to this special episode of On the Edge, where we will be reflecting on the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump in Alaska. We have gathered together 10 different voices of former guests to get their reactions to what happened in Anchorage. It is a long episode. We've broken it up so that you can go to the individual person as you wish, maybe not taking it all in one go, but I urge you to at least listen to some of these voices because they do have insights which I am sure will be of use to you when trying to understand what is happening here between Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and Europe. So, on to the interviews.
Well, let's get right to it because I know your time is very valuable and limited. So this is just a basic question. What's your reaction to what happened in Alaska?
So we have three parties here, and let's see what each party has gotten out of this. Putin wanted to escape sanctions. He achieved his goals. Wanted to have a trip to American soil. He achieved his goal. Wanted not to end the war. He achieved his goal. Trump wanted to look Putin in the eye. Done. Wanted to have a ceasefire. Not done. Wanted to have pictures and make a good post on X. Probably also done. Ukraine wanted to have ceasefire. No. Wanted to the ball not to be in our court again with accusations that we are standing in the way of peace. Also not done, and actually it's something that perhaps can happen, and this is why it's a huge risk for us. So all in all, it was a big nothing. However, it ended up not so good for Ukraine. And right now we are all obviously worried about how it will go with President Zelensky in Washington, D.C., kindly with all the warmth, reminding that previous meeting didn't go so well.
Yeah, how concerned are you that Vladimir Putin might have influenced Trump in some way, and he is going to be delivering the next time he meets with President Zelensky, he will basically be carrying the Kremlin's message?
What we 80% sure of is that Putin's position didn't change since 2022. In fact, their position didn't change since 1991. They are rebuilding Soviet Union. And I think if anybody had any questions about it, they have received confirmation in so many levels of it. So Putin just said he is standing on his position, which is they have included our territories into their constitution. They are not backing off. They are ready for a land swap, but they are not ready to go away. And there are some limitations they want to put on Ukraine. This is not acceptable for Ukraine, and that's why President Zelensky's job on Monday will be super hard. Because after meeting with Putin, Trump will say, okay, this one wouldn't bend. Then let's put pressure to President Zelensky. The issue that we see is, as of right now, Ukraine has been perfect, right? We have done everything by the book. After the spat in the Oval Office, after we understood that that being straightforward doesn't work with President Trump and trying to explain to him things, so Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire unconditionally, and we have voted the rare minerals deal in Ukrainian parliament. No questions asked. Basically, we just went ahead and did it. So we thought that being so accommodative and so good will be our plus. Right now, it may be our minus because President Trump knows that if he pressures enough, we may break. And President Zelensky needs not to break.
And what happens if President Trump, presents to President Zelensky something that would be absolutely unacceptable to the Ukrainian people? And where do we go from there? What happens after that?
So we need to prepare so this would not be this like worst case scenario. So President Zelensky needs to go there with the support of our European partners, and he needs to ideally he doesn't need to sit at the table with Putin and Trump. He needs to have it like at least 4 people there, like somebody else. I don't know, President Macron, Keir Starmer, whoever, Ursula von der Leyen.
Mark Rutte.
Mark Rutte will be a bad thing because he's representing NATO, and President Trump already said that even if it will be NATO, it will not be called NATO because it's triggering Putin. You know what is triggering us? That it was a red carpet to a war criminal. And when I was watching it, honestly, I have seen all the faces of people whom we lost over the last 3.5 years. And I was just thinking how unfair it is to all the people of Ukraine, giving him such a wonderful and warm welcome. And again, I think it will play very badly for America, because right now all the other authoritarian dictators of the world are watching that and saying, so it's possible to go ahead, commit all kinds of the war crimes and get away with it, and then probably we will be invited onto American soil to shake hands and walk the red carpet. But coming back to the meeting, so the issue that President Zelensky will be facing is that we need United States on board, but there is not too much stuff that President Zelensky can sell inside the country. This is the big difference between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. In United States, not too many people care enough about Ukraine to like really protest. Though I really thank to all Alaskans who stood up in front of Russian and American delegation. In Russia, people don't care whatever President Putin or dictator Putin will decide. And in Ukraine, you have seen that people were protesting when they felt that anti-corruption organs were offended and tried to be stripped of their independence. So imagine what they will do if there would be something that we will feel is unfair deal or a bad deal or something that President Zelensky was not supposed to do. And this is, I think, one of the goals that Putin has. But on the other hand, and this is what I'm telling today to everyone, we are the same people who in 2022 declined the offer to capitulate. And we are fighting, we are not alone, we are exhausted, but we are not people who will accept the defeat right now because somebody said so, especially if those are, one is an international criminal and another person didn't even come to Ukraine beforehand. So I think right now it puts President Zelensky into a pretty tough spot, and we all wish him wisdom and self-control on the meeting on Monday, because it will be indeed a very complicated situation. I also think he needs to go ahead and talk to people honestly on one of his addresses, explaining like what the offers are on the table and where are his red lines, what he will take or not take. That will at least prepare people for what's coming.
One last question before I let you go is, God forbid, this creates a rift between the Trump administration and Ukraine, with now it would be in essence Trump and Putin. If the U.S. abandons Ukraine, or if the presentation or the request that the United States makes are unacceptable to Ukraine, and this creates a rift, what are your concerns about that happening, and what would that mean for Ukraine moving forward?
So our main concern is, of course, political support, and that there are many decisions in NATO made still by the United States, and many types and kinds of weapons that are being provided because of the silent or loud nod from the United States. We want to hope that European partners will step up and will be able to cover on some of the gaps that will appear. it will be very hard for us. But again, choosing between hard situation and capitulation, we would not choose capitulation, because the history is looking at us. All people who are fighting are looking at us. You can imagine like how many calls I received this morning asking like what's going on, and like are they all crazy and don't they know anything about Ukrainian people? I didn't hear anyone who would say Trump probably sold us, so let's capitulate. None. So I truly believe in Ukrainian people, though I'm very concerned about American diplomacy.
As I have always said, it is not only Moscow that needs to learn the lesson that Ukraine is no longer a colony and is a sovereign state, but it is also Brussels and London and Washington that must recognize that the time of colonization is over. Ukraine has a bright future because Ukraine is sovereign.
Yes, we are democracy, so observe us with the democratic procedures.
I hope only the best for you, Kira Rudik. It is always a true pleasure to speak to you, and one of these days down the road, we must have you back in the studio for an extended period of time and more in-depth discussion. But I appreciate hearing your reaction to what happened in Alaska. Thank you. Hey, always good to see you, Malcolm. Always good to see you. And look, I kind of feel almost foolish for doing this massive project, because what a nothing burger. All this was a photo. All this was a photo op. It was a photo op. That's all it was. Well, with a war criminal.
I think it was bigger than that, but not for the Trump team. It was a very nice, clear, multi-month effort by Vladimir Putin to work Steve Witkoff to get them to believe that Donald Trump was on a path to a Nobel Prize, and to think that, you know, something big would come of a Trump-Putin summit. And as you know, I've written several books about Donald Trump, and my last one about Trump was called The Plot to Betray America: How Team Trump Embraced Our Enemies and What We Can Do About It, right? But this is a clear case of him not just embracing our enemy. It showed the senior subordinate relationship in this in this affair. We thought we had seen it in Helsinki. No. We really saw it now. Donald Trump as the subordinate, right, parlayed American superpower, America's richness, America's military strength, and laid it all out to honor a KGB officer, officer,
an indicted war criminal, an indicted war criminal
who should have been arrested on the spot. He did it with red carpets, with applauding him for coming to Alaska, and Putin and Witkoff put this together. And I suspect in the end, even Trump will be upset because the coverage has been horrendous. Fox News called it weak, and on CNN, they had a former general who goes, "This is the most despicable moment in modern American history, where the United States bowed down like we were Lukashenko and Belarus, bowed down to Putin." And by the way, speaking of Lukashenko, as a component of this, Trump spoke to Zelensky this week, along with Prime Minister Merz and President Macron. But he also gave a private call to Lukashenko in Belarus because Putin asked him to. So now I see this as the moment that the United States, well, actually I saw it the moment the United States had gone over to what I called in my book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, the axis of autocrats. And Trump went over really when he directed Marco Rubio to vote in alignment with Russia, Russia, Belarus, North Korea, right? And Myanmar, okay? against a resolution to condemn Russia. Just insane, right? The United States is now a voting bloc member of the Russian fucking Federation.
How much of this was also kind of another Epstein distraction?
Everything is an Epstein distraction, because this I don't even want to use the words they tried to do it. This summit, right, which was supposed to be about bringing peace to to Europe, and which we all know is just sophistry. This is all bullshit on Trump's part. But because we've seen real summits in our lives where the stakes were very high, right? Nixon to China, Gorbachev to America. This was not that at all. This was literally bending at the knee, genuflection. So, but the way it came about with Trump giving them a 50-day deadline, and then just arbitrarily on a whim, okay, I'm going to bring that down to 12 days. And then they didn't even make it to 12 days. They got to day 10 and they announced, we're going to meet him next week, which is bullshit. They had been planning this for months. And Trump really needed what he thought would be a huge distraction from the Epstein files issue. And I'm afraid to say that that short-circuited himself. If he had done something monumental, all right, and I'm going to give you something Trump could do if he actually liked a Nobel Prize, right? If he had managed to talk a 75% reduction in land-based ballistic missiles with atomic bombs on them between the United States and Russia, that would have worked. Trump is he says he's an anti-nuke. If he had gotten rid of the two legs of the U.S. triad and gone to submarines, right? Everybody would say, whoa, earth-shattering. This is the biggest change since Oppenheimer, right? Since the first bomb went off at, Trinity site. Nope. None of that. Here's what they had. They didn't even have coffee together. They didn't even have coffee together. Right now, you and I having coffee in our respective capital cities, we are actually achieving more than they achieved. So this was a propaganda show for Putin. Now this, by the way, is part of Alexander Dugin's, right? Putin's, crazy ideological philosopher.
Yeah, Kremlin philosopher, yeah.
This is part of Russia taking its position that Trump, Putin, and Z all seem to agree with, that I wrote about in my 2018 book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, in that the world is becoming tripolar. And the bipole of America as the anchor to the Atlantic Alliance and Europe as an independent anchor, which works symbiotically, that is over in the era of Trump. It could be restored afterwards. But as far as Trump is concerned, he views Europe as Putin's property. And this aligning himself with the United States, Belarus, and Russia is exactly what I wrote about, which is the United States now views itself as the primary prop of the Western Hemisphere, right? Russia would be allowed to do what they want in the Eastern Hemisphere, right, as the central pillar to that, and China would be the Asian Hemisphere, right? Trump views the world that way. But I really am more afraid that he now views himself as now that's the political lines of contact in the world. Then there is the oligarch component of this, which is that the United States now sees itself as a full member of the axis of autocracy. And to be a member of the axis of autocracy, autocrats now are strictly motivated by money. And, or let me rephrase that, lubricated by corporate money to carry out political goals which meet their corporate interests. And that is what Benito Mussolini invented when he said il fascisti, right? Fascism is a dictatorship and symbiotic relationship of the corporate right right, to establish a country to greatness. Trump views himself as part of that axis of autocrats, but loves the idea of oligarch money. And Putin is sitting on maybe $500 billion of
Nobody knows.
untapped, sanctioned oligarch money. And that's the real thing. By the way, were you aware they bought a business group over in another airplane to have business discussions with the Commerce Secretary and other cabinet members? This is about bringing Russia out of the hole so that they can gain access to their money and to, to be quite honest, to their women. A lot of Republicans think that Russia's the last bastion of untapped white women. That's not a joke.
Yeah, no, I know. I do know that. I'm not going to keep you much longer. We're doing, quick a compendium of different reactions to what happened. But let me ask you this before I let you go. You are very active in the Legion. You fought here in Ukraine. You support the Legion. You support the Ukrainian armed cause to resist
absolutely
Russia. With that perspective in mind, what is your response to, we are not one step closer to a peace deal. We are not, the guns will not fall silent anytime soon.
No.
What's your reflection as a Legionnaire and as somebody who supports, men in uniform, men and women in uniform here?
Well, as we met in that month.
That's right.
Right? The month before the war. Where I learned that Ukraine is a surprisingly European country. I mean, beautiful,
and also
clean,
and also clean, beautiful, all the rest of it, but also with the mentality that is in direct conflict with what you just outlined of this kind of like breaking up the world into spheres of influence.
Right.
Ukraine has been a colony of other empires for centuries, and one of the pillars of why the people are picking up weapons and operating drones on the front line is to resist this concept that a small country has sovereignty. Not to distract you, but I think those things are connected. When you look at it.
Yeah, I said that I went to Ukraine to fight for democracy. This is the country we should be now, right? This is what we landed on Normandy for, which was to take back a nation from dictatorship, fascism, and allow them to live free and breathe freedom and liberty as America has defined it for 250 years. And now America is becoming the autocracy, a dictatorship. And Ukraine is showing us how it's done. Zelensky is truly the Churchill of his time. But look, I support the Legion every day. I pay the rent on our safe houses. I spend thousands of dollars of, money that I make on YouTube and Substack. I don't feel that I deserve that money. I give that money to my battalion. We just did a giant drone raffle for Wild Hornets, right? We just raised $25,000 so Wild Hornets can create interceptor drones. That's nothing to me. My friends have sacrificed their blood, their bodies, their lives. My Ukrainian friends and my members of the International Legion that are still fighting on the Kharkiv, holding the line on the Kharkiv front. But to see the United States walk away from those values is disgusting. Ukrainian support is now reaching its highest level. Even 67%, I believe, of Republicans think that Ukraine should receive more weapons and are starting to fall away from this thing. When the meta-narrative now starts to break, and this is the last thing I'll say, that Donald Trump is now joined a KGB dictator and is now essentially a junior Lukashenko in this thing. When people start realizing America greatness has just been compromised because Donald Trump wants a Trump Tower in Moscow, and it's now before their eyes. This dud of a performance evaluation meeting, which is what I think Putin was giving him when he rode around in the Beast, an honor he hasn't given to any other president, if I'm not mistaken. Any other world leader, I've never seen another world leader ride in the Beast, the president's limousine. So interesting, but there's a lot to be seen. But I'm just grateful that he did not turn Ukraine over to Russia yesterday. But mark my words, though, J.D. Vance set the pace 3 days ago. And this is the real danger, because the top 4 richest men in Silicon Valley are ardent haters of Ukraine. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, the guy who that owns J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and David Sachs all loathe Ukraine and say it publicly. J.D. Vance said the other day that we'll sell weapons to Ukraine if they have money. We will stop giving them weapons and intelligence. I think intelligence is going to go away. I think it really is going to go away. I think it'll just be straight foreign military sales, FMS, and Europe has to pay for it. And that's what he said. He said, but the United States is out.
Wow. Yeah, nothing good came from it. Nothing substantive came from it. And I share your concerns that this administration in particular is just looking for an excuse to abandon Ukraine. Malcolm, it's always good to see you. It's always good to talk to you. We're going to keep doing it. You stay in touch with me. I'll stay in touch with you. And one way or another, we're going to keep supporting Ukraine. I know I am, and I know you are too.
You're kidding. That's unassailable.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks for your time.
Slava Ukraini.
Geroyam Slava.
I just checked in the night, really. Like, what was happening? What's the result of the meeting in Alaska and all that, I mean, it's exactly what I expected it to be. So I'm kind of like, it's getting tired by this point to just like that. When Trump came to power, like as president, I made like a bunch of predictions publicly how it will go.
Mm-hmm.
And so far it goes exactly, basically like 1-to-1 as I thought it would. So yeah, it's just it's a bit of a
okay. So what were your predictions and what's come true?
One of the main things I thought would happen is that they will do a campaign basically of pressuring Ukraine to capitulate, but by calling it peace. And I thought so because of his campaign, really, like because he was like, we just want peace. He would name the aggressor. He would never bring up anything like that's happening. Would blame Ukraine for things, for starting the war, literally. But also like a lot of Russian disinformation was propagated by Tulsi Gabbard, Hexed, Vance, Patel, all of those guys, like in his close circle. And I was like, oh no, this seems like it's gonna be a strategy of basically appeasing Russia, of making no demands towards the aggressor and only pressuring the weaker party, essentially, which is the victim, Ukraine. So that's kind of what's been happening, and we now periodically hear things like Zelensky's dictator, all that, obviously, but also like he said like recently he needs a constitutional permission to give away territory, but he doesn't need it to kill everyone, quote unquote. He literally said something like that just in a video recently. And I was like, what? Like, you obviously, during martial law, during the invasion, you have a right to defend your country, constitutionally so. You do not have a right to just give away your territory without any, Anyway, it's just a lot of that. And Alaska, I expected to be just more of that. Just basically being like, oh, Putin and we want peace. And now it's all up to Zelensky. And he needs to take a deal. And if he doesn't, they will just blame it on us, basically. Say that, they didn't take the deal. Washing my hands away of that thing. And it's kind of like what I predicted to happen, because it's currently it feels like just a prolonged, like inevitable ending of this thing will be that nothing will happen. Probably sanctions will also not happen. He gave us 2 weeks again. Have you seen it? He gave us 2 weeks time again. 2 weeks are like how long now? Like how long are 2 weeks?
Yeah. And I mean, you're out there. I mean, we're getting it bad here in Kiev, but you're out there in Kharkiv, while these guys are doing basically nothing but a photo op in Alaska and legitimizing Vladimir Putin by a war criminal, an indicted war criminal, being invited to the United States. Meanwhile, your city is getting attacked every day, every single day. I mean, I can't imagine how you feel. How are your thoughts today, seeing the farcical nature of what happened in Alaska?
Well, it's farcical, I think, is exactly like right. It's a bit of a charade, really. Like it's just it's a performance show, really, for Putin as a way to legitimize Russia, to get cute pictures with the United States president. That's literally what he did. He came, made demands, and then smiled and walked away, on camera, and that's it. So there was no like questions. He like answered more. I think he had like more talking time than Trump. I believe people said like 8 minutes or something like that, where he had like 3 minutes of like press stuff. If they and they didn't they didn't do questions afterwards, I believe, at all. So yeah, so no deal was made, nothing was made, and that's exactly what I expected it to be. It would just be prolonging of this silly, in between. So they say, well, we're doing diplomacy, so we can't do sanctions, right? We can't sabotage, anything, because we have this. It's all of, I prefer diplomacy. I just want peace, and that's a very useful tool for Trump to basically just help Russia held by a thread, not impose any sanctions, do not give us any really aid whatsoever, and just assist them in taking more territory in meantime. So how I feel about it is how anyone else would. Like it's pretty, as much as we expected, we talked with you about it last time. As much as we expected that to happen, it's still difficult when it does happen, because lives of the people depend on it. For example, I don't know if you know, but we have very interesting coordination emergency center in Kharkiv, which is pretty unique. It's only in Kharkiv, and it's basically the centralized coordination center for all emergency. So strikes, fires, attacks, it coordinates everything. Ambulance, firefighters, rescue teams, everything. And that was built 50% on the money of USAID, or USAID, how you pronounce that, right? So Trump cutting that off prevents a center like that to be opened in Dnipro, Zaporizhia, in other cities, right? And I recently just visited it, and I was like, oh shit, like I didn't even know that USA was literally like helping me and my family and my friends live, because we only get like such a good air raid sirens, in like a minute. Response time used to be 3 minutes in Kharkiv. Now it's 15 seconds. So it's entirely improved. It's using very expensive technology, which is what USAID helped buy, to secure the safety of the people in Kharkiv in particular, right? And it's just things like that. Most people just don't know, but just how impactful really Trump is in a negative way to both, I believe, United States, but also the world, and Ukraine in particular. So I feel pretty bad about it. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, so he takes away USAID, which is providing this program. He does this farcical thing in Alaska, and he legitimizes a war criminal like Vladimir Putin. Do you have any hope at all that the United States will be a useful partner in finding a resolution to this war, given the factors that I just outlined there?
Under this administration, no, I don't think so. Maybe in the future, but currently it would likely just go exact same way. There would be a lot of like pointless chatting, appeasing the dictator, and probably no sanctions. And likely just nothing will be done. They will indefinitely prolong this whole thing and be like 2 weeks more, 2 weeks more. 2 weeks will turn into like 4 years basically, and that's it really. I think they just will at some point like walk away and just fully blame us on the fact that we just warmonger in Ukraine didn't want peace. Okay, so that's always an exit that they have out of this negotiation process, which I think Trump in some way might want by now, because his whole shtick was like, I'm gonna stop the war in 5 days, or like 24 hours or whatever it was right at the beginning. That was part of his campaign, really. He talked about it a lot. And obviously it didn't happen. I laughed, honestly, like over his message when he wrote, apparently it's very difficult, actually. The situation is actually quite difficult. And I'm like, no shit, the biggest war in Europe since World War II is quite a difficult situation. Yes, it is a difficult situation. So that was, kind of funny that he was like, on Twitter or somewhere, he was like, I did think it's so complicated, but apparently it's not easy for me to fix. But then he was like, it's Biden's war, though. It's not mine. So
Oh,
yeah,
and of course, I guess Putin in Alaska kind of like gave him a little ego boost by saying, yes, it was Biden's war and it was all Biden's fault.
I think Trump said again, I think I heard it like without exaggeration like 50 times by now, that if I was a president, that war would never happen and all that. Like, and I think Putin actually word for word apparently said so to him. Like, he actually came up and said, if you were president, this war would never happen. Probably with no elaboration or anything, just to like throw this phrase at him. And Trump was like, yes, hell yeah. Like, it's like, have you seen a compilation of Trump being happy that Putin called him a genius? Have you happened upon it?
No.
Yeah, there's like this compilation back in the day before his second term, I think, as a president, when he was like, Putin called me a genius. Did you know that he called me a genius? And he like said it like, I think like there are 3-minute compilation or something of him repeating that Putin at some point in time called him a genius. Like, I bet he did call him a genius again in Alaska.
It's a KGB agent. He knows exactly how to play Trump.
Yeah, he's not stupid. Yeah.
No, I won't take up much more of your time. Thank you for coming back on. It's lovely to see you. It's lovely to see you being well. I know things are very bad in Kharkiv, and I'm so sorry for that. So thank you for reaching, for spending some time with us today. Do you think the people of, I'll ask you, but also generally the people in Kharkiv who are suffering so badly under Russian aggression, do they understand, do you have the opinion that this is Trump? This is not the American people. The American people, polls say the American people are still strongly supportive of Ukraine. Is there a perception in Kharkiv, which is suffering so badly, that Trump is not America? Trump, is Trump. But most Americans still are very supportive of Ukraine. What's the general public opinion?
Unfortunately, I must say that the public opinion on the United States soured, I think, all over Ukraine. I think you probably in Kyiv, noticed that yourself as well. And it has been souring even before, like, Trump came into power, due to the half a year of delay in aid, due to prohibition of far-range strikes at Russia. Remember all of that, right? It's been a while, but that was a lot of like things that where people felt, pretty constricted in a way that impaired our war effort. And but now with Trump administration, it's quite difficult, because at one end I see the polls, for example, like you said, right, that show that overall Americans support Ukraine, but at the same time he was elected 2 times, and it's kind of difficult for people to think about it in a way that that doesn't reflect the country. And in my opinion, it's not wrong necessarily. I'm not saying like everyone is a MAGA, obviously, but it's a substantial portion of the population that both voted or didn't go to vote at all, which is when it's a question of Trump, it's about as bad, honestly, in my opinion, to not do something to prevent that person from coming to power again after how his first term went, never mind everything else. And now, yes, some people are, I guess, generalizing a bit, So they're like, America's this and that and that, and I do try to bring it to people's attention that there are a lot of Americans still that support us, that people like yourself exist, people like a lot of people who have been behind us like the entire time, and we should not discard them. And but there are a lot of people who unfortunately have quite a lot of anger, I would say, about it now.
Well, I think it's completely understandable, and I can only just apologize. So, thank you for touching base with us and getting back in touch. It's lovely to see you again, as always. Please stay safe, and I appreciate your time. And I'm sorry. Ivan, welcome back.
Hello again.
I set up this entire day for reactions to what I thought might have been an important meeting, but I don't know if this was. What is your reaction to what happened in Alaska?
Look, in a nutshell, it could be described as a nothing. Really nothing. And to be honest with you, a lot of my friends, and especially me, I'm not expected to get something incredible from this meeting because of only one thing. Usually, such kind of meetings, they need months of preparation. Tens of small meetings. I mean, low-ranking officials, for example, Russia's side, US side, they have to agree some points and they have to agree some decisions, and only several months from now they could prepare the final deal, big deal or small deal, whatever. But here we've got a situation when this meeting was prepared only within 1 week time. So when you are preparing something in 1 week time, you have to understand the outcome will be so tiny that we got. And from my side, with what is point which stressed me a lot. It was the first meeting and the first footage of meeting Putin and Trump when they shook hands. And normally, Trump, he shakes hands very in strong way, trying to pull your opponent. Just remember how he done it with Macron, what was Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. But here, Trump's hand, was below Trump's. It's how it's called. It's a language of body language.
Yeah.
So it shows that Trump, he was ready to be the second person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to be a maverick. You like to be a goose.
Yeah, from Top Gun. Yeah, from your perspective, do you think this has any effect on concluding this war?
No total effect on this war. If you would like to name some good points from this meeting, they are Putin and Trump. They did not get agreement on visas. U.S. visa for Russian citizens to enter U.S. Okay, it's good. The second is direct flight from Washington to Moscow and back. So no agreement. One more point. Some of Russian diplomacy facilities were taken by U.S. government during Biden administration, and now Russia would like to get these buildings back. No agreement on it. And what else? Probably that's all. And no any other financial agreements, because I know you mentioned about the Steve Bassett, yeah? He is a chief treasury. Yeah. And his opponent, Anton Siluanov, and also Kirill Dmitriev, he's chief of Russian Special Financial Fund, governmental fund, and they would like to get also the meeting to discuss sanctions, to relieve sanctions, and to open Russian markets for US business, especially for Russian banks, because we have to understand Russian business is suffering. There is not so much money on Russian market, and they totally need someone from US to come on Russian market and bring lots of monies, US banks, US companies, and it's a good result because of no result here.
What do you think from somebody who's kind of studies and who has been in kind of the intelligence and security apparatus was when you looked, you've already mentioned the body language and the relationship between these two men. If you were looking at your leader, not Zelensky in particular, but a Ukrainian leader, let's just say, behaving with another adversarial world leader, and you were to see this kind of relationship, what would your alarm, what would your concern level be?
I will be disappointed, and I have to expect some concessions from Ukrainian side if we are talking in this particular way.
Right, hypothetical Ukrainian leader.
Yeah, and we have to expect some concessions because, you're number two, you're not equal, you're number two. So only concessions on some points of, I don't know, economy, sanctions, etc. It's everything could be. And here's one thing I would like to highlight. This meeting was held on U.S. Military base, and lots of Russian commenters and the journalists, they were so satisfied to visit U.S. military base and to see, at least for once in a while, how it looks like inside, because of lots of Russian journalists, and they were raised in understanding U.S. will try to destroy our Moscow. U.S. military boots will enter and destroy our land and destroy our soil. So it was the first time when they just find themselves on this military base and could see how it looks like inside. Of course, we do understand it's not the biggest one military base on US, but as I saw, they were totally impressed what they find out.
So it might have been a fact-finding mission for the Russian military if nothing else actually happened diplomatically or in terms of the war. It's a fascinating idea. How concerned are you as a Ukrainian citizen that not only does this not bring a closure to the war any closer, but might prolong it? I mean, what's your concern about how this affects a final resolution to the war?
Look, as I told you before, no one in Ukraine was expected from this meeting to get something great, some great results. But what I'm really concerned is next meeting, Mr. Trump and Zelensky, which is scheduled on Monday in Washington, D.C. And from my side, from my perspective, my assumption is that Mr. Trump will force Zelensky to accept some of Russian demands. I mean, territorial demands, some of sanctions demands, relieve some sanctions, just to make a big deal as Donald Trump used to have. And I think the rhetoric of Mr. Trump will be more aggressive towards Zelensky, because it's much more easier to force someone to do something when your opponent is weaker, when the opponent depends on you. Unfortunately, we did not saw this force towards Russian leader, towards Russia. No, look, there is 200 days of Mr. Trump staying in cadency. Did we heard about some sanctions on Russia? No, only promising 100 days, 180 days, 2 or 3 weeks, 10 days, 50 days. So from my side, Donald Trump, he's not going to impose any sanctions on Russia Federation. But nevertheless, he could impose some sanctions on Ukraine. We are talking about military support. Look, in Ukraine, lots of people clearly understand there is no free of charge weapon from US. We do understand. Of course, we understand. It's a commercial market. We understand. You have to get money for your weapon because you created this weapon on your money. Taxpayers paid lots of taxes and we are ready to buy it. We are ready to go in depth, but just to give us possibility to buy every weapon we could afford, not just in the menu. We would like to have a la carte.
And how do you think if Zelensky meets with Trump and these demands are made?
He will refuse, totally refuse. And I will explain you why.
Yeah.
Look, it's not because he would like to continue this war. Really, believe me, he's really totally exhausted. In the Ukraine, totally exhausted. And here in Kyiv, you could clearly understand. Lots of people are ready to freeze the front line, but the Russian demands, they are incredibly high. About the sweeping of territories. It couldn't be done in any way. It's an ambush for Ukraine. Look, there is no authority under Zelensky. Zelensky has no authority. Have no authority to take a pen and starting making drawing line. Oh, here's for Russia. Here's for Ukraine. He has no authority to do this. And the next stage will be criminal investigation toward him. Treason, high treason. He's not allowed to do this, and he clearly understand he won't do it. He will refuse Donald Trump, I'm totally sure, and lots of European leaders will support Zelensky, and the next step of Donald Trump will be so, expressive. He could just throw everything on the ground. Look, I'm trying to stop this war. I've done everything what I really could. So I'm just going away from this deal. Just to continue this war with Europe. Let's Europe fund in your war. I'm just stepping aside.
And how do you think the people of Ukraine will respond?
We are ready. Look, we are totally depend on, not totally, not so much depend on US support. And we are really appreciate for your support. We are totally understand for how much it costs. I mean, even small light armor munition up to Patriot missile. It was done because of your efficient economy, because of your taxpayers, because of your technology, So, and it's lots of much appreciate for your great support. And we understand if we would like to get more weapon, we have to pay it. It's a normal situation in a capitalistic world. So it's normal.
And if Zelensky refuses Trump's,
and as far as I know,
will Ukrainians still support Zelensky?
Yeah, Ukrainian will continue to support Zelensky because we have no any other option. We have one Zelensky, we have one Putin, and we have this constant war. Just for your audience, this war lasts 1,200 days. The Second World War, I mean, when Germany invaded Soviet Union, this war lasts for 1,400 days. 1,200, 1,400. You have to understand for how long this war lasts.
And we're no closer to peace.
No, unfortunately. From my side, I mentioned before our meeting, I really expect for some weapon which could really make a great impact. I'm not talking about to stop this war. Stop this war could only one bullet, a sniper bullet, or nuke strike on Moscow. We're not considering this, but Ukrainian own ballistic and cruise missile program. As far as I know, this program is on the way. Some of Ukrainian officials, they mentioned in November 2024 that we made some test flights and we're satisfied what we saw. And as far as I know, Germany in a close cooperation with Ukraine to create own Ukraine missile, and only Ukraine will be responsible to choose targets 100 kilometers away from the front line, 200, 300 kilometers away from front line.
And that would change.
I think it will make a great impact because, look, as far as we know, around territory of Ukraine, Russia concentrated about 600,000 of individuals. It's enormous. It's a great number. And we understand within range about 100 kilometers from the front line, lots of people there dispersed. Yes, it's correct to say, yeah. But after this point, 100 plus kilometers, people became located more concentrated. I mean, in some camps and some
in the cities,
and some facilities, and Ukraine will get ability to strike these locations, to strike some warehouses located pretty far away from Ukraine territory. And let's be honest, the drone with a warhead of 50 kilos, it's just only 50 kilos. But the ballistic missile with a warhead of 500 kilos, it's a great difference.
So nothing out of Alaska, but hopefully someday in the near future, Ukraine will be able to defend itself.
And here's a small information for you. Just before meeting in Alaska, Donald Trump, he got a phone conversation with Alexander Lukashenko, dictator of Belarus, and everyone was surprised. Why? What reason? Because Lukashenko is totally depends on Russia. Belarus totally depends on Russia, and lots of experts, they're just considering Belarus as a entire part of Russia, so not only independent state. But here is a small point: what Americans are interested in Belarus? Fertilizers, potash. Is it correct? Potash fertilizers.
Fertilizer, like for farming.
Farming. Because Belarusian producers and the deposits, it's about 20% of the market. Then from my side, US would like to get more of this fertilizer from Belarus, bring it to the market, and to make some impact on Canada, who is a big producer, on China and the rest of the world. I think it's one of the points why Kit Kelly visited Lukashenko, and he got a conversation with him. I'm not talking about the hostages. I'm not talking about some people who are staying behind the bars. I mean, political prisoners. I think U.S. more interested in this deal.
Well, they flew an entire plane load of commercial and corporate leaders from Russia to Alaska as well. So I don't know how much this was about Ukrainian peace and maybe how much it was about financial deals.
Russian leader, he would like to divide war and the business. War will continue in this way, but business with United States will go this way. And I have to say that the gas deal is still on the table.
Mineral deal.
And the gas deal, we were totally sure that after 18 sanction package, this proposal will be totally buried. But as far as I know, it's still on the table. It's still under discussion because lots amount of money. To be honest with you, I have no idea. Donald Trump, he's 72, yeah? Or 70?
No, 79.
79. Yeah. What for? He need $1 more billion. What for? To buy one more yacht or one more business jet? What for? What do you need so much of money in this age? I have no idea.
Ivan, thank you very much
for
coming back to have a discussion. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Terrell, buddy, thanks for stopping by. I thought when I was planning this, I said to myself, there's a chance that anything I discuss in the week running up to Alaska would be fundamentally changed because, and it would be outdated. If I had an interview with somebody on Tuesday and then Friday rolled around, the entire circumstance could change because this was so hyped. Nothing. I mean, this was nothing. What do you think about what happened in Anchorage?
I think the biggest culprit in all of this has been the media precisely for hyping it up to nothing, because it really shows the lack of I think professionalism in our media. Because if this meeting were to amount to something, if it was supposed to be meaningful, then we would have heard about the different back channel conversations that would have been had. Mm-hmm. Think about what does Ukraine want? Obviously, it's not going to give up its territories. They've made that very clear. And Putin has said over and over again that they have no interest in stopping. And they're actually advancing in some respects, and Ukraine has been maintaining. But look, ultimately, this meeting had nothing to do with Ukraine. It was about two criminals meeting and legitimizing themselves. And why do I say that? I say that because Trump actually needs Putin. Putin needs Trump. Putin, by most standards, if you honor the International Criminal Court, is a fugitive. Mm-hmm. He can't go to a lot of places that he ideally would like to go, because if he did, then he would be placed under arrest. Even in South Africa, even during the last BRICS meeting, Sergei Lavrov went as opposed to Putin.
That's a good point.
Right? So think about that. So he's an international fugitive. And so by stepping not only on U.S. soil, but Alaska, a former Russian territory, he legitimizes not only himself as somebody to respect and the international rules-based order to ignore, but he can also spread propaganda about the history between the United States, and, he can blabber on about this BS about Anchorage, Alaska, and the different Orthodox churches that are across Alaska. And whoever decided that Anchorage, Alaska would be an ideal place to meet Putin is an idiot, and they ought to be fired. Right, but on a more serious note, what did people genuinely expect? When you think about meetings of this magnitude, after what Putin has done, after the civilians, hundreds of civilians who've been killed since this war started, we both live here. We've heard the explosions. In fact, there has been a significant increase.
I've lost friends.
Yes, and the missile strikes have only increased. And Trump saying, if you don't stop, I'm going to give you 30 days, or how many ever days, 50 days. And then he cut it down to 12 days. And then, so there's no penalties for Putin. Yet, anytime we hear about Ukraine has to give up everything. Russia has to give up nothing. When Obama met with the Iranians in order to broker the Iran deal, mm-hmm. there was years and years of back channel conversations that were designed to set up that meeting, right? Trump has done none of this with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. And so what did come out of this was that, if you notice in that little 12-minute presser that they had, 10 to 12-minute presser, Putin, who was the guest, spoke for a vast majority of the time. Yeah. A vast majority of the time, spreading his propaganda about Ukraine and Russia being the brotherly nations, as he kidnaps children and sends home journalists in body bags with missing organs and signs of torture. And then you also have a situation in which Trump comes up and follows up Putin and says, we all had to deal with this hoax, this Russia hoax. We know, Putin knows it was a lie. I know it was a lie. So what he was doing was establishing himself as a man who can bring the meeting together. And he can do that because his base cares about that. The fact that he had this meeting with Putin. He did the same thing with Kim Jong-un. I had the meeting. And then when nothing happens, then he can simply say, I had the meeting and they didn't want to listen to me. But his base buys it. And so that's why I say this meeting had nothing to do with Ukraine. It had everything to do with themselves.
And as somebody who also lives here in Ukraine, I mean, I am concerned that not only isn't this going to find a way forward to a cessation of hostilities or a ceasefire or peace deal, it might be the opposite. This might just elongate it because, nothing was achieved of substance.
But what other option do they have, though, Phil?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Look.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So look, let's make this useful for people who aren't here and who don't have access to talking to Ukrainians beyond polls and all this other stuff. We talk to Ukrainians every single day. We interview Ukrainians all the time, right?
Right.
And whether they're in front of a microphone or whether they're on the street here in Kyiv or across the country, I spent the past 6 weeks going across Western Ukraine, right, which is a whole different experience, but it's the same overall feeling, right? The war may not reach there as far as drones and missile attacks, but you see memorials everywhere of people from that part of the country who paid the ultimate sacrifice for fighting in this Russian invasion. And many people will tell you that they feel like Trump is compromised. They keep saying compromise. That's what most people think about it. And so this idea that something tangible was going to happen is just pretty naive. But what people are, I think, doing is they're just waiting for the political situation to get better, and they're in a waiting phase. But they have no other option. And then you saw with Zelensky saying, I plan on speaking with Trump after this meeting, where he made that statement clear this morning. But what could he do? What other option does he have? So when you think about this, this elongating it, frankly, if the war goes on, it sounds counterintuitive, but that actually falls in Ukraine's favor, because if the war stops for some reason, all Russia's going to do is that they're going to reorganize and strike again. And so I think we're looking at this as this is the bad option, this is the not so bad option, this is the worst option, and then there's a good option. There are no good options here because Ukraine's biggest military financial donor has a president that looks at Zelensky with contempt and looks at Putin with adulation. So until that scenario changes, all Ukraine can do is fight and hope until 2028 that you have a Democratic president that will come in and have a different attitude, one that could exceed that of Biden. We hope, but it's bad. We have to function in the bad because there can be a worse. That's all Ukraine has.
You think there's any chance at all that this war is concluded?
How?
During a Trump administration?
How?
Exactly.
How? So when people talk about the war ending, my response to you is, what does ending mean? And so when Trump says that we're going to put the war to the end, what he means is he can have some big press conference where he could say, the Ukrainians have agreed to stop. And yes, Putin gets everything that he wants. He gets the land. He doesn't have to return these tens of thousands of kidnapped children. He doesn't have to pay any financial settlements to Ukraine for all the land that it destroys. He doesn't have to make himself criminally accountable. They get to keep Crimea, Donetsk. All the people who are currently trapped in those areas, they're just stuck there. And so he doesn't have to give anything. And if that is what's meant by saying the war stops, Zelensky could do that right now if he wants to, but the country doesn't, regardless of what the opinion polls are saying about the war wanting to end. Yeah, of course people want the war to end, but where we don't get concise answers of is, how do we want the war to end? The pollsters really don't deep dive into asking people what that looks like. And so I don't see any outs in these next 3.5 years. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I mean, and if it does, so here's the thing: if it does happen, then the war is going to resume again, because Putin has continuously said that he doesn't view Zelensky as a legitimate leader. Do we think that there's going to be an election in Russia where Putin is replaced with somebody who wants to broker a deal and give back Crimea and Luhansk and Donbass and the rest of the territories that they stole after 2022? Do we realistically think that's going to happen? No, because one of the people who was widely considered to be a replacement of Putin was killed in an accident in which his plane fell out of the freaking sky.
Yeah.
So and that guy was markedly worse. And then you have a person who was the former president, who Ukrainians affectionately call as the drunk uncle. Okay, Medvedev, right? So I think we need to be realistic here about what does ending the war mean, and if the quote unquote ending the war means that future hostilities could be avoided, because they won't. And here's another thing that we really need to focus on, and this is towards the Europeans. The bottom line with this and why Putin is able to operate the way that he operates is that Putin cares more about Ukraine than Europe does. Ukraine means a lot more to Putin than France, than Germany, than Europe. It's easy to be an autocrat in this world. You don't have to answer to anyone, really. You don't have to follow the international order, the rules-based order, which in itself is contemptuous, because the rules-based order via Angela Merkel accommodated Putin in his behavior up until the point where it didn't work. So we really need to so all of these structures that we look up to and that we hear about in the foreign policy classes, and you go to our little fancy think tank meetings, this rules-based order that we keep talking about isn't really protecting the most vulnerable people. It's not holding the most contemptuous people accountable. In fact, it's accommodating them. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Damn. One last question before I let you go. As a fellow American, I know the Russian press corps didn't see it. I know the Russian delegation didn't see it because they hardly left the airbase. But how did you feel seeing the streets of Anchorage lined with Ukrainian flags?
I didn't know that there were that many Ukrainians in Anchorage, Alaska.
Good answer.
That's the first thing that I thought. And I'm wondering, wow, well, America is a very huge territory, right? So that's the first thing. But I was really happy to see so many Ukrainians lined up in the streets. Again, it was a pleasant surprise. And I didn't know that many people in Anchorage, Alaska actually cared about Ukraine. And we're going to need that public sentiment. If of all the imagery that we saw, that was the most optimistic image that I saw, the people lined up in the streets, because at the end of the day, whether a Democrat wins in 2028 or a more reasonable Republican, and I say reasonable Republican because whatever that means in 2025 replaces Trump, then what we hope for is that the public will put pressure on who's ever in the White House to resume its support for Ukraine and be the leader that Ukraine needs. Because, as a person who's not a Republican, somebody, as it pertains to this part of the world, somebody who I genuinely miss is John McCain.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can only imagine what a John McCain presidency would look like if he were assuming that role right now. Right? And somebody that legitimately Putin would be afraid of in that case, right? But more specifically, Europe, as in NATO, including Canada, will fall in line.
Yeah.
They would do exactly what the U.S. says.
In a position of real leadership.
Right? Yeah. And so that's the best thing that we can hope for. And going back to our main point is that Ukraine is in a holding period. And this war, I don't see it realistically ending in the next 3.5 years, because Trump is just setting everyone else up to fail but himself, because he can always say, look at the meetings I've had. I tried. And that will be a part of his memoirs when he finishes his final term. He could say, I spoke with Kim Jong-un, Obama didn't want to speak with him, and Biden didn't want to speak with him, and all these other people didn't want to speak with him. I did, but I'm the reasonable person. And these people never listened to me. They never took my advice, because had they listened to me when I was talking to them, then then they would have gotten somewhere. But that's the problem. They didn't listen to me. And so because of that, he's going to always give himself an off-ramp. And meanwhile, the Ukrainians have to trust in America's choices. And that's all they have to do. They have to hold out and and keep fighting. There are going to be more people who are going to die. There's going to be more, unfortunately, we're going to be enduring more bombings. And we're going to continue to see more children that are put into this Russian kidnapping system. So it's going to be worse. And if anyone tells us any different, they're lying to us. Well, they can't lie to us because we live here, right? They can't lie to us. But for the rest of the world, if anyone tells you that this is going to get better, they're not telling you the truth, because Europe has not fallen into a wartime economy yet, compared to the degree Russia has. What we do hope for is that the United States continues the sanctions. That's the best that they can do, because the Russians don't want these sanctions to continue. And when Trump said in his little 1 minute replies after Putin spoke took up all the 10 minutes, he said, we really want to resume the business relationship. And what that suggests to me is that he is thinking about the sanctions. Now, the sanctions, there are some that Biden did under executive order and some under like an older law. It doesn't come to my head. But the point of it is that he needs congressional support in order to lift the sanctions off of Russia. And so we just need to hold on to the things that the Biden administration put in place and hope that Trump is either too stupid or too distracted, i.e. the Epstein files, to think about it much. Yeah. And so Ukraine has shown that it has the resilience to hold on, despite all of the obituaries that people write about Ukraine. But they have no choice. We don't want to hear it, but that's all they have.
And sadly, you're right. More people. All this means to me is more people are going to die, and the exhaustion and the stress and all the things that come with this godforsaken war will just continue. So. It may have been pretty much a nothing burger, but at least it gave us a chance to sit down together and have a chat about things, which I always appreciate. So, Terrell, thanks for coming by.
Absolutely.
Thanks, bud.
Two Michiganders.
Good one. Thanks.
Yeah.
How do you feel as somebody whose country is occupied, and this entire process is supposed to be about trying to find a resolution, which Crimea is central to, and it appears as though this entire thing was nothing but a farce? So how disappointed are you in what happened in Alaska?
Well, I had no expectations, and I could say I was mostly concerned than hope for anything. So as soon as they achieved nothing, I'm not disappointed. Like in the results of the meeting, but I am disappointed that Trump pulled Russia from international isolation, invited him to Alaska, had a red carpet. Like it makes Russia on the first pages of international media. So this is definitely a win for Russian diplomacy and absolutely zero progress to Trump.
How disturbed are you that it kind of legitimizes Putin? I mean, he's been invited back to the halls of power. He's speaking to the leader of the free world, in quotation marks. How much does that disturb you?
Yes, you're right. This is quite disturbing, especially considering that if Putin would come to any other decent country in the world, he would be arrested as a war. So, yeah, I do agree with your words, Philip. Trump is definitely legitimized.
Do you think they even discussed Crimea?
I'm not sure about that, but I do believe they discuss like the war in general, because if I'm not mistaken, Trump had some hopes for any kind of deal, and they might have like discussed something. But what makes me sad here that we are having some kind of agreements and meetings without Ukraine, and how can you discuss Ukraine without it being there, and Europeans, of course. Like, because for me, it looks like Trump sees that Putin and Zelensky decided to start the war together, not like Russia invaded Ukraine, and now we are both equally guilty, and we have to find some peace. The peace will be achieved the next second Russia withdraws its troops from Ukraine. So it's quite easy to have this peace.
If there is going to be further talks, if this is the beginning of a process that includes Zelensky, how hopeful are you that Crimea will be at the top of the list of issues that will be discussed?
I do believe in Zelensky's ability to like have a strong position on this issue, and I do believe that he is concerned about Crimea as well as he's concerned about every other square kilometer of Ukraine's territory both occupied in 2014. So yeah, I do hope that he is going to be our voice there, and like will not let us down, because he's not ready to sacrifice any Ukrainian territory, and I'm thankful for him doing that.
Do you think if there is more involvement by the European powers, if there are further negotiations, that they will also take into consideration Crimea?
Yes, I do. It's taking in consideration because Crimea is like a very important point for European safety, and it's in their best interest to like have Crimea deoccupied as soon as possible.
So, generally, what are your thoughts now that this kind of kabuki theater, it seems like, has been concluded? What are your general thoughts about American involvement in trying to resolve what is in many ways central to this conflict, and that is your homeland of Crimea? Do you have any hope that after Alaska that Crimea is any closer to being free?
I do believe that this Alaska thing achieved absolutely nothing except big victory for Russian diplomacy, making it big. But I do believe, I am hopeful that in these negotiations, firstly, Ukraine and European countries will be involved, and secondly, the question of Ukrainian occupied territories will be discussed, because we have to remember that it's not just territories, it's people who live there, like families, friends, people who suffer from Russian occupation, people who are hopeful and still waiting for Ukraine. So, yeah, I wish people would remember about this more than they care about money or some economical resources.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go, Lina. It's been lovely touching base with you again. It's good to see you again.
Likewise.
And it's good to see you somewhere safe in Europe. And obviously this whole thing has been a disappointment, clearly, but do you remain hopeful that one day your homeland will be free?
Absolutely, I am. And Philip, I've been to Denmark talking to European minorities about Crimea, and I felt so much support from young people being involved into European politics. So I can see their support and their empathy. So yeah, I do hope that Crimea will be deoccupied sooner or later, but I will come home. But now I'm going back to Kyiv.
Okay. Well, when you come back to Kiev, we'll come and have a coffee.
Okay.
Thank you so much for getting in touch, and thank you for spending some time with us despite the technical difficulties and all the rest
Thank
of
you,
it, and
Philip.
timing problems. So we'll see you back in Kiev, Lina. Stay
Sure.
safe. Be well.
Have a nice day.
Well, John, thank you for joining us. We'll have a brief little chat here about what happened in Alaska. What is your take on how things went between Putin and Trump?
Two men met. One is a clown, the other is a killer. And the killer got a nice pudding, as we say. He got baked Alaska. And the clown got nothing at all. The problem with the clown is he doesn't understand something very simple. There are some things that you cannot do a deal about. You cannot approach a murderous war, and a wholly unnecessary one, and a wrong one, as if it's some real estate development. And so the entire framing, the way Donald Trump views the world, is comically, disastrously unsuited for something like this. Now, both my grandfathers and my father fought to defend a simple principle. My grandfather's in the First World War, my dad in the Second World War, and it's this: a nation cannot invade another nation to steal their land. Full stop. Trump doesn't get this. Trump thinks that Putin is a real estate developer with a lot of money and a lot of power. No, he isn't. He's a psychopath. As it happens, he's in charge of the world's biggest country. Russia doesn't need land. This isn't really about land at all. This is about Putin's fear that if the Russian people see a successful democratic Ukraine, they will say, well, why can't we be like that? And then that's the end of him. But Putin he's a fragile monster, because there's a second thing that he's fully conscious of. If he stops this war, then the Russians might wake up from their zombie sleep. They might say, hold on a second here. We've lost 1 million men, whatever it is, 150,000 dead, the rest horribly maimed. And we've lost all this money and we've lost our good name. For what? So he can't stop the war. And we should never allow him, for Putin, to get away with his number one war aim, which is to keep some of the land he's stolen. No. And we certainly shouldn't allow that to happen de jure, by which, that's Latin, and I did Latin at school, but just in case people don't get it, there's two things, de facto and de jure. What that means is, by facts, okay, but by the law, de jure, no, not at all. So, for example, if Putin was proposing to stop the war, ceasefire, and the Russians sit on what they've got, I think there are many people in Ukraine, including Zelensky, who would say, okay, so at least we stop the killing. But not de jure, meaning not that Russia then has a right to Donetsk or whatever. Now, Trump, because Trump is a clown and his entire framing is wrong, doesn't get that. And he thinks, all I have to do is to get the two parties together and I can get there. He doesn't understand that Putin cannot possibly stop the war. And he doesn't understand that the West and Ukraine cannot possibly allow the violator to get away with stealing Ukraine's land. So there isn't, I'm sorry about this, but there isn't going to be a peace anytime soon. The war continues and will continue to continue until Russia is crushed. And
how's it going? Yeah. How's it going down in Blighty? How are the Brits responding to this?
Well, there is there is massive sympathy for Ukraine to this day, but I know that there is also a kind of sense of is this war still going on? And the only two generals that Russia can count on are general boredom and general change of subject. And both of those are working well for Russia right now. So I know, because and everyone's invited, but I'm organising the 4th Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival on Putin's birthday, which is October the 7th, but we're actually going to have it in Kyiv in an undisclosed location, and essentially, yeah, and fantastic. But it raises it's vpdfo.com, and we're raising money for Ukrainian charities. And because of this, I know it's becoming harder and harder for people, it's harder and harder for people like me to raise money for Ukraine. Today, for example, I've been on LBC, and I was on LBC last night. So because of people want to know what happened, but most of the time, the war has become boring. And this goes for people in Britain who are very sympathetic to Ukraine and don't like Putin one little bit. But they kind of, next subject, can the war change? The other thing is that this is very unusual because the Alaska thing has taken the headlines away from Gaza. Now, Gaza, and Gaza, of course, is the more intense tragedy. But it is not the only tragedy. Both are tragedies. And it's perfectly possible to say that Netanyahu is a war criminal who is keeping the war going because if he stops, he's in trouble, for him, jail. And Putin is a war criminal, and Putin is keeping the war going because if he stops, somebody will kill him. So we have problems with both Netanyahu and Putin, and it's entirely possible to be conscious of that. And some of the times I get very frustrated when the Palestinian tragedy takes focus away from the Ukrainian tragedy. And actually, in terms of the big picture, we cannot allow either to happen. And either are happening, and this is partly because we have a clown and a corrupt clown holding the most powerful democracy. He holds power on the most powerful democracy in the world, and he is not using that power effectively. And what we saw in Alaska was almost a kind of black comedy of incompetence. Now, it's not all that bad, Phil, because what Trump didn't do was he didn't say, oh, look, we've got a deal when there wasn't one. And also, or even his patsy media could see that at the end, there was no press conference. No, not a single journalist was able to ask a question, apart from the really good lady, I don't know who she is, but she had a go, Mr. Putin, when are you going to stop killing Ukrainian civilians? Good on her. Well done.
Yeah, and he feigned that he didn't
and
hear
he went,
her,
and he feigned,
understood.
and he became temporarily deaf. But this was, I think, for Trump, a PR disaster. And you could see it was also good that when he met Putin, Rubio was there in the room. So there was a grown-up in the room who would be pushing back Putin. What's scary is the journey in the beast. So when Putin, Putin lands
in the car, in the armored car, yeah.
Yeah, and they have a nice chat. What do they talk about? So, my friend Christopher Steele, the former head of the Russian department at MI6, he left MI6 and then he wrote this private report which became public, the PP tapes or whatever. So Chris Steele believes that the KGB, FSB have got sex compromats on Trump. So who knows? Because we haven't seen the hard evidence. But of course, if you go around Moscow asking for the hard evidence, you're going to die, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because it's a dictatorship. And people don't understand that. Or I do, you do, every Ukrainian does, because they're living right now. Ukrainian women under Russian occupation get raped. A small number, but this has happened, a small number of Ukrainian soldiers have been castrated by the Russian army. 20,000 children or something like that number have been kidnapped by the Russians. So you don't have to explain to the Ukrainians just how imbecilic Trump's strategy is. It's not a strategy. He is diminishing the world and all its complexity. But actually, this isn't a very complicated problem. Russia needs to fuck off out of Ukraine, because otherwise the principle which everybody fought the First World War and then the Second World War goes down the pan, and that causes chaos the whole world over. Now, and actually Rubio gets that, the Europeans get that, Keir Starmer gets that, but we all have to go, because Trump is so vain and his personality is so eggshell thin, that we have to, or rather people like Starmer have to sort of dance around. Thank you very much, Mr. Trump, for your commendable efforts. You're wasting everybody's time, Mr. Trump. You're a fool, and you're a corrupt fool, and you're a clown. You have met a killer. You put American soldiers went down on their knees to iron out the bumps on the red carpet, so a psychopathic killer could play the grandee. And then you went for a talk and there was no substance. And at the end of it, guess what? Not a single journalist was allowed to ask a question of the two great men. The only question, Mr. Putin, when you're going to stop killing Ukrainian civilians, was shouted. And the dictator, Putin, he pretended he couldn't hear. Fucking ha.
One last quick question before I let you go. There is the special relationship. There's, European potential influence on Trump. Do you think there's something that can be done by Keir Starmer or somebody else in the European circle that could influence him back to sanity?
So, no. I don't think so. I commend the staff of the Bull in shipping Camden, who were told that J.D. Vance was coming to have dinner in this lovely old pub, and the staff had a mutiny. It said, "No, fuck off. We're all going to walk out." And the management had to go, "Okay." I don't think there is anything that Trump. I think that Trump is too stupid and too set in his ways. He's possibly a blackmail victim. I think we've got to think about that possibility. I also think that there were some bits of body language from the Putin figure in Alaska, which I've never seen before. And I've watched, not only have I met Putin in 2014, but as a former TV reporter when I was at the BBC, I've watched a lot of footage of Putin. And people have been asking me, is that a double? And I thought, well, it could be, yeah. There's a moment where Putin goes, huh? Like something happens, and it's way more vivid and actually likable and human and alive. Putin, under the spotlight, is incredibly controlled and self-controlling. Whereas that particular moment, he's really quite alive, and it's unusual. And I thought, they can't have sent a double to talk to Trump. And then you think, you know what? If you've sacked every single Kremlin expert, and that the only people who can get close to him are the lickspittles, then it's possible. The big question,
all he has to do is carry the message.
Yes,
from the real
message
guy in
is,
the Kremlin.
And the message is nothing. I mean, the point, there's no political risk because the message is nothing. We're not doing anything, and we're not having any questions. And every time Putin says, we're not doing this, Trump says, yes, okay. Yeah. Not cool. I do feel
of the free world.
The leader of the free world is a clown, and it is a disgrace to America. There's one other thing that Trump is actually, he's conscious of what the Europeans, and I think Starmer is less important these days because of our failing economy thanks to Moscow's Brexit. But Merz in Germany is good, and Stubb, the Finnish guy who plays golf, is good, and they're getting the message across. And Melania is getting the message across too about the kids, the kidnapped kids. Mm-hmm. So I feel that Trump's, although he wants to do a deal, Putin's doesn't want to do a deal, and then Trump's position on this is going to get harder. What's also happening is that the American economy is slowly, and more slowly than I thought, but it's going tits up because of the tariff nonsense. Yeah. And Newsom in California, they poked the Californian bear, and he's getting his act together. And there's a moment, there's a wonderful, British propaganda at the beginning of the Second World War was dreadful. It was up its bum, it was upper class, it was stupid. And then finally, somebody in the Ministry of Information phoned up Pinewood, which is our cheap version of Hollywood, and asked, and I think some very, very funny kind of film producers said, okay, we'll have a go. And they took the footage of the SS marching, at that time, the world's most terrifying fighting force, and put it to the tune of the Lambeth Walk, where you go forwards then backwards. And it's still there on YouTube. It's really funny. And what Newsom is doing by putting everything in caps and saying, thank you for paying attention to this matter, he's mocking Trump in a way that's needling Trump. And everybody, including the MAGA loyalists, get it in a way that's a British World War II film. All of it, we're taking the piss out of the SS. Great, we're actually mocking them. So the mockery is cutting through from Newsom, good. And the message from Melania and the Europeans, and Starmer, to be fair, I'm sure privately he's saying the right thing. And the general sense that Zelensky, although, he's been abused, he should have been there, he wasn't, he's been insulted, his people have been insulted. Why are they suffering for so much? And things are worse now in Ukraine than ever before. It's harder to live in Kyiv than ever before. Yeah. While Western sympathy and Western sympathy is going down, Western boredom is going up. All that said, I think Alaska was a good thing if you care about Ukraine, and a good thing for the peace of the world, because it looked obvious that the killer conned the clown. And I think even the clown got that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing you in October for the Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival. I will be attending. And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you, John.
Phil, your voice is so deep and profound, and when you read out the official title of my festival, it sounds, that sounds pretty good. I'd go along to that.
Well, you will see me there. Thanks again for your time, John. Much appreciated. Operator Starsky or Andre, thank you very much for joining us here in the middle of the night. We have to note that because of scheduling problems and some issues there, and of course the time difference between here in Europe and Alaska, we're having to do this late at the night. Now they've already landed. As we speak, apparently they are in the actual meeting, but unfortunately we will not be able to get the reaction from the planned press conference. Nevertheless, I did want to reach out to you and get your impressions and your thoughts at this time. So thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much. We can look at it from two perspectives as usual. One is emotional perspective, when you can see a US president shaking hands with a bloody maniac, which is, of course, extremely embarrassing. On the other hand, there is always a diplomatic etiquette, let's call it this way. And it's present no matter who is the person you're meeting, be it, I don't know, Joseph Stalin, doesn't matter. You got to stick to the diplomatic etiquette. It's a part of our culture, right?
Yeah. And I wonder what you think I mean, you work a lot in information warfare, and one of the things that I think is interesting to point out is that by keeping this strictly on the Air Force base, Vladimir Putin's motorcade doesn't have to drive through the streets in Alaska and see all the Ukrainian flags and all the protest things, which of course would be terribly embarrassing for him. What do you think about that?
First of all, I am extremely impressed to see so many people on the streets, so many people protesting against Putin, so many people supporting Ukraine, which is extremely important, especially today, when this support seems to decline over time because people are being tired of war and things like that. But I'm extremely impressed to see so many Ukrainian supporters, active supporters there on the streets. And of course, we all understand that Putin, who is not accustomed to see people protesting against him, that would most probably hurt his feelings. So I can also understand why they did it, why they didn't let the internationally wanted war criminal to see all those people with blue-yellow flags. But who knows, maybe, of course, his security will deliver this information somehow to him. We will see. I really want to see the way the Russian propagandists will be talking about this meeting and the protests taking place there, if they will even mention that those protests took place in Alaska.
Yeah, the Russian press corps, and in inverted quotation marks there. I will. Do you expect to be the headline of Kommersant or Argumenty Fakti or all the big papers in Russia? Do you think they're going to show the pictures of all the Ukrainian flags? I somehow doubt it. But it does make me wonder, as a Ukrainian, how do you feel that this meeting is happening?
I feel, let's say, disappointment that Ukrainian president is not present there, right? It's one of the biggest issues that I can see right now, because they will be talking about Ukraine without Ukraine, and I think it's wrong. Whenever Trump keeps any sort of communication with Putin, whenever Witko holds conversations with Russian representatives, every single time when it happens, we can see the same traditional response feedback from the American side that these conversations, these negotiations were an absolute success, everything's fine, the war will be over tomorrow, and things like that. But we see that the story keeps repeating over and over again, that as soon as it happens, there is either a massive missile strike or a drone strike somewhere in the Ukrainian city taking place, and there are victims. And Trump again says that, well, I'm kind of disappointed with Putin. I think probably this is something that we will see this time as well. Actually, the very fact that Putin is having those negotiations with Trump in Alaska is one of the reasons that I'm concerned right now that there might be some kind of missile strike on Ukrainian cities taking place tonight. So I will be monitoring this as well.
Yeah, we're afraid of that here as well, here in Kiev. What do you think? What do you think Ukrainians generally will be looking for or hoping to hear out of this, or is there any hope at all that something productive will come of this?
Well, we gotta keep in mind that there were a lot of consultations between the Trump's team and Ukrainian team prior to these negotiations, and also there were a lot of consultations with our European partners. We expect a ceasefire, basically, so we need to stop the killing of Ukrainians in the first place, and we expect that Trump will, of course, force Putin to accept the unconditional ceasefire that President Zelensky was offering all this time since like March this year. This is something that I expect to see.
Yeah. What would be unacceptable, do you think, for Ukrainians if these two leaders come out of their meeting? And again, we're recording this before the press conference, but in expectation of, I don't know, something coming of these talks, what would be something that would be absolutely unacceptable to Ukrainians, do you think?
I think any condition that Russia will be trying to fulfill, any request that they will be trying to fulfill will be completely unacceptable for Ukraine. And we know their conditions, we know their demands. They want Ukraine to give up 5 regions forever, including those regions that Russians don't have full control of, and also so-called demilitarization, reducing the number of Ukrainian military personnel and things like that. Basically, Russians didn't change their demands since 2022. This is the same thing that they demand from Ukraine. They demand basically a capitulation. And on one hand, of course, Trump already mentioned that he will not be talking with Putin. He will not be demanding Ukraine to give up those territories, and basically he will not be discussing the very topic of Ukraine surrendering, ceding those territories to Russia. But on the other hand, several days ago he mentioned something interesting. He said that according to the poll coming out of Ukraine, 88% Ukrainians want to see the deal made, and if, of course, he means a deal according to which those regions of Ukraine go to Russia. Frankly speaking, I researched this moment and I couldn't find such poll made in Ukraine because whatever polls we have in Ukraine, official polls made by the Kyiv Institute for Sociology, those polls don't indicate that 88% Ukrainians want to cede the territory. It's the opposite. All the polls that we have, all the official polls made by the official agencies, indicate that a majority of Ukrainians protest and find it completely unacceptable to recognize the territories that Russia occupies as territory of Russia. For example, the center of Ilko Kucheriv researched and concluded that 81% Ukrainians will never recognize those territories as Russian territories. It's a poll made in 2024. So this is something dangerous because this is what Trump says, and most probably he thinks so. But on the other hand, there were already so many, cases when he changed his mind all of a sudden, so it's really hard to tell if they will be really talking about it, and if he really thinks that this is true. So I don't know. It depends primarily on if he had a good hamburger today, on breakfast, or excuse me for such comparison.
Well, look, I mean, I've been coming here for a long time. And, Ukraine's history has sadly been one of colonization by one empire or another empire. People have always tried to control or attack one another, coming through and using Ukraine as a colony, as a way to attack or to gain territory. So there's this sad history of colonization in Ukraine. But I have to say,
and you were on Maidan, and we've spoken about this in the past as well. I think something fundamentally changed on Maidan. And I think the mentality of being a colonized country is gone forever. There was something fundamental that changed. And all week in the build-up to this summit, people have been asking me what my opinion is, what my thoughts are. And I have said time and time again that what not only, of course, does Moscow need to get it through its thick skull that Ukraine is no longer a colony, but I think the West needs to, whether Brussels or London or Paris, Berlin, and of course Washington, need to understand this fundamental truth. After Maidan, there has been an attitude in Ukraine of Ukraine for Ukrainians. I wonder if you feel the same way, and if you would maybe, express some thoughts on what I've just said there.
I completely agree with you, my friend. There is a big reason this revolution was called Revolution of Dignity, right? It was a moment when I realized that my nation actually has dignity, and it was something that charged me with, the idea of fighting for my country, which I did since late 2014 until 2024. So if you want to know my personal opinion, my personal expectations from this meeting, I think, I'm very skeptical regarding this. I'm very skeptical, first of all, because it's basically a trend. Trump asks Putin kindly to do something, and Putin says, yes, of course we want peace, but there are 1 million nuances that we should address and things like that. And then he strikes another Ukrainian city and people die, and Trump says we need another round of conversations. Basically, sanctions against Russia should have been implemented already like a week ago, right? And we don't see this happening. The question is, does Trump do what he does in terms of negotiations? Does he do that for Ukraine, or does he do that for Trump? And this is important to understand the difference between those two, because if he does it for Trump, we will never see the result. We will see Trump meeting Putin because it's important for Trump, because it's important for, I don't know, whatever he imagines, for his image, his PR, I don't know. But if he did it for Ukraine, if he tried to defend Ukraine, defend people of Ukraine, defend the people that are victims of this Russian aggression, right? According to the international law and things like that, according to the morality at least, then I think that we would see more action coming from Trump. We would see more, I would say, stronger position, right? Because after all, Trump is a president of the United States, the probably the strongest country in the world right now. And I think that from his standpoint, he can easily solve the situation if he really wants to solve it, right? So the question is, does he negotiate with Putin because it's important for Ukraine, or does he do that because it's important for Trump?
Well, Starsky, I appreciate you taking the time out in the middle of the night to have this quick conversation. I understand you're off on a nice camping vacation, so I hope you enjoy it and maybe put these things out of your mind for just a little bit of while. Everybody deserves a little bit of relief and, stress release and all that. So I appreciate you staying up late to talk, obviously, with some things that are unanswered at this hour. But we appreciate your insight. Thanks again, Operator Starsky.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Zarina, thanks for being with us. I know you're out promoting your movie, which I definitely want to talk about because it's relevant.
But what was your response to seeing Vladimir Putin in Alaska being heaped praise upon by our elected commander-in-chief, President Trump?
Well, Phil, thanks for having me. I'm happy to speak to you, although not happy to speak about that subject like anybody else. One word comes to mind, it's a complete disgrace. If we talk about reframing it historically, of course, many people have said that, and Molotov-Ribbentrop comes back to mind, as well as Munich, as well as the reshaping of the world overall in 1938. And it was a shameful feeling to watch the president of the United States of America, my country, for many, many years, shaking hands and waving to the convicted criminal and mass murderer. There's not much to say there. However, I was concerned about the global community and the colleagues, the member of press, being too much involved and preoccupied with the optics and the theatrics. Because what I have learned from many years of investigative work on the Russian deals, something like this almost signals a shady deal or something of importance happening in the background while everybody is being distracted. It's a diversion, one of the Russian tactics, by the way. It's a strategy. And I think it worked. And so I looked very carefully of what could it be. And sure enough, it was right there, not hiding too hard. Reuters ran an article on August 15th about the decree that Putin has signed the same day. And that's a decree that allows foreign investors, mainly ExxonMobil Oil, to re-enter Russian joint venture, namely oil project, state-run, Sakhalin-1. That project is a gigantic, enormous venture, and it is operated now by Rosneft, which has a familiar to some figure of Igor Sechin, who is a long-term ally of Vladimir Putin. And that whole story has the background that takes us all the way back to 2011, at least, when the then ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson signed the deal on Arctic exploration for $500 billion with Putin in presence, after which Tillerson was awarded the Order of Friendship by Putin, again, personally. And here I want to add that significantly in 2016, that same Rex Tillerson was appointed the Secretary of State, no less, by Donald Trump during his first term. And here we can turn to never verified, nevertheless, still there, Steele dossier, which claims that Rosneft deal, the sales of it and the brokerage fee of $11 billion was at the heart of the Russian interaction with the future Donald Trump administration.
Yeah, everybody fixates on the P tape when they talk about the Steele dossier, but the vast bulk of it was how compromised Trump and his associates are by connecting with all these different oligarchs and Russian power brokers. So, nobody should be particularly surprised, that the transactional monetary issues. I mean, there was an entire separate plane that followed Putin's plane filled with corporate executives and representatives of various state-run agencies. How concerned are you that there is some sort of economic transactional agreement being made in behind the curtain in the shadows? And what do you think Putin, if Putin is offering Sakhalin 1 back to Exxon, and all these other economic deals, what do you think Putin is expecting in return?
Well, very simply put, lifting the sanctions, and that will re-energize the Russian economy, which is now in a good state, and with Ukrainians now targeting the oil refineries, Russia is suffering, and it needs to boost back its sales of crude oil, because right now it's, as you know, Phil, limited to the discounted crude sales to China and India, which accidentally was targeted by Trump. India was with the secondary sanctions. So their position is very volatile. By letting Exxon back into the deal of Sakhalin-1, where it used to own 30%, under the condition that Exxon will lobby for lifting sanctions overall. It's very clear what Putin is doing here. They're offering this whole $500 billion exploration deal to Trump, who is so money-driven, and restructuring the whole economic picture in order to fuel the military industry and continue the war of aggression in Ukraine. It's like it's clear to a child what's going on there. We just need to look at the things clearly and not let ourselves be distracted by Putin's high heels or double chin.
Yeah. How much are you concerned as a resident of Ukraine that Trump is going to carry with him not his own agenda, but Vladimir Putin's agenda, and try and shove it down the throats of Ukraine? How much of that is a concern in your mind?
A very good point. And again, as previously mentioned, very concerned. I think they will try their best to reframe the negotiations to make Zelensky look as the one who doesn't want to negotiate and to become the aggressor almost in a way, because oftentimes the Trump administration is known to place the guilt, and the blame for the aggression on Zelensky, which is another, by the way, a tactic called the big lie, because it's complete Orwellian distortion of the facts, if you will. We all know clearly who was the aggressor in the situation. But reframing it this way, there will be an attempt to sway the public opinion and the global community feeling overall about that. It's another manipulation. And I think here everybody's being manipulated, starting from Trump and ending with the members of press.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but as an American watching Vladimir Putin lead Trump around by the nose in Alaska was deeply embarrassing and shameful. So I hear you there. There's another aspect to this as well. You are an Odessite, proudly so. You spend a lot of your time in Kherson. You have your wonderful documentary out, and you and I have discussed the Human Safari many separate times. And I have to admit, Zarina, you were on my mind, and Kherson was on my mind when I saw the glad handing and the praise and all the just, sycophantic, behavior of Trump. While there are every day drones hunting down civilians on the streets of cities like Kherson. You have your new movie out. I will add a link to it in the description below. You have been documenting this for a long time. What were your emotions when you saw, knowing people in Kherson who at the very same moment they were doing this in Anchorage might have been terrorized by drones? What was your emotional response?
It's just very, very painful, Phil. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being the first TV channel, YouTube channel, or anybody in video media to break the story with me. Because as you know, Human Safari took 3 months to break. And between Byline Times, Euromaidan Press, and you, we were the first ones to deliver it to the public. And then it took months, and it's still taken already over a year to kind of deliver it to the collective knowledge. And there are reasons for it that I'm not going to go into that in detail, but basically it's a psychological defense, as we discussed it during this first show, because it's a moral injury to a normal psyche to know that a human being is able to hunt another human being. And I can't believe that we talked about it a year ago. It's been a year.
Over a year ago, at least. And you're right. I think there is something about it's so atrocious that the normal human mind rejects it because of its scale of. But then the same thing was happening in the Second World War with the Nazi extermination camps. So
Exactly.
Sometimes, even though you know it and you see it right in front of you, your brain denies it. So I will keep pushing that story. I'm going to advocate for your documentary. I know it's being very well received. You're currently traveling, but you'll be back in Kherson, I believe, before too long and reporting again. We'll be staying in touch. I just want to, before we go, what are your concerns for the next step? So they've had this meeting. They went behind closed doors. All these shady economic deals are happening. Putin is getting reestablished as a public figure and somebody who ostensibly could be, normalized. What are your fears for the future, for Ukraine, for the West, for the war?
Well, I'll start with Kherson because, that's where I'm based and that's where my heart is and my research is. There's something new happening there, and you again happen to be one of the first ones to break it, along with Byline Times. There's a drone siege, first in the world history, that is now risking to cut Kherson from the rest of Ukraine, because as we know, on the other side is encircled by the river with the Russians on the other side. And right now, even traveling there on Friday presents an issue because I'm discussing now the ways of getting there, and the main highway is constantly under attacks. So we have to go with a drone detector, take precautions, and I will stay there to report, Phil, if the drone siege in fact happens. It needs to be reported. It's not being covered. Nobody in the international information field knows about it. It needs to be known. Russians talked about it, about the notion, the concept of drone siege as applied to Sumy. And they failed to do it there for various reasons. And now they're trying to do it to Kherson. So that's my concern for Kherson, obviously for Sumy as well, for other places, other cities and villages along the front line. Overall, for Ukraine, my concern, and not just mine, but apparently Zelensky's and SBU and Starsky said it today, that the attacks will intensify. And that usually what happens. It's a typical pattern. So we are to expect more attacks overall on every city in Ukraine, because Putin is a bully and he's showing force and he's showing violence as a sign of force to convince Trump, and it works. So that's my concern for Ukraine. And globally, I'm again afraid more than of anything is of manipulation on a long term, where apparently even Europe will be swayed and kind of like tricked into submission following the US steps and basically abandoning Ukraine, which in turn, from a bird's eye view, will lead to a global catastrophe and another major war, because Russians are already mobilizing intensely the Ukrainians in occupied territories. Just this morning I read about the increase in mobilization in the Khersonian occupied regions, and they will have this giant army of people who know how to fight, and that army will not stop, Phil, as we know it. They will keep marching through Transnistria and on to Romania and the EU if we don't stop them. And we are not doing enough to stop them. We as a global community, as the West, you personally do more than most people, as you know, as a journalist, and I try. We have a lot of good, conscientious journalists who are trying to stop it, but overall, as industry, we're failing, and that's one of my concerns.
Yeah, the messaging is the narrative is being dictated from Moscow, not from the free world, and I think that should change. And so we here at On the Edge are going to support you, and we are going to keep getting the word out, and anything that we can do to assist in your efforts, we will certainly do. I appreciate you coming on and talking about your thoughts post this disgrace in Anchorage, and we look forward to having you back here in Ukraine. And thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Okay. Героям слава.
Alexander, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to discuss this. I guess the most basic question is, what is your reaction to what happened in Alaska?
Well, my reaction has changed, starting with the morning, because in the middle of the night I was waiting for the press conference, and I was more optimistic right after the press conference for a very simple reason, because I did have high expectations, and I thought that maybe under the circumstances, the best outcome for us is no agreement between Trump and Putin. Because the worst case scenario would be if they get together, align together, and start pushing in the direction of pressing Ukraine into territorial concessions. So I understood in the beginning there was no agreement reached between Putin and Trump, which is good news in itself for Ukraine. But later on, just a few hours ago, as soon as I read this tweet or post on X by President Trump, in which he says that there is no need to go for a ceasefire, and instead of that, we need a peace treaty, comprehensive peace treaty. And to me, it's extremely dangerous development, which means several unpleasant things for not only for Ukraine, but also for Europe, for the United States, and for the whole global security. Because the very idea of having peace treaty instead of ceasefire is Putin's idea. And as he views it, he is talking about so-called root causes, that peace treaty should solve root causes of war, which means in practice surrender or capitulation for Ukraine, and absolutely unacceptable for us demands by Putin, including territorial concessions and recognition of annexations, of course, yes, and some other absolutely unacceptable demands. So my concern is that, unfortunately, the things as of now look like Trump has agreed with this Putin's proposal, and the danger is that after all they might align together, and they might and Putin might be trying to promote this Putin's idea, which is very dangerous for Ukraine. So unfortunately, the situation has deteriorated. Some hope gives the prospect of President Zelensky coming to Washington and maybe trying to sort out things, to settle the issue. But at the same time, again, I'm a little bit apprehensive, because I believe that it would be much better for President Zelensky not to go alone and to meet Trump face to face, but also to come as a group of European leaders, including leaders of the UK, Germany, France, representative of the European Union, and Secretary General of NATO. I think it will be more effective and more safe to prevent from happening very unpleasant situation in the Oval Office.
Well, we have, of course, famously had the incident in the Oval Office in which Donald Trump and Vice President Vance kind of ambushed him. How afraid are you, or how concerned are you, that should there be some sort of, meeting, if it is alone or with a group, that it will still be Trump pushing the narrative that has been fed to him by Vladimir Putin.
Yes, what I'm afraid of that Putin came under influence, maybe via Vitkov, under influence of vision of the world or outlook of Putin. So, and I'm afraid that this time, you cannot avoid in your mind this picture, how President Zelensky was treated in the Oval Office and how Putin was treated yesterday. You see stark contrast, stark difference. And you cannot help being concerned about what will happen again, whether we might have or not such kind of rerun of events or not. Unfortunately, I believe that so far Trump is leaning more towards Putin, whom he views with respect, whom he considers to be a strong man, and in such situation, who is in more vulnerable position and more vulnerable situation? The weaker side, of course. And there is a temptation to solve the issue at the expense of the weaker. Instead of helping the weaker to win the war against the stronger state, we might have something different. And also, I'm concerned that we can rely less on President Trump. Well, I'm not talking about the United States, because I still believe that we can rely on American people, on the US Congress also, on public opinion. But with Mr. Trump, you never know. So, and the situation remains complicated, unpredictable. And what I'm afraid of, where we might end up in, is that if, for example, Trump, under influence of Putin, will put forward requirements or demands absolutely unacceptable for Ukraine, for example, with regard to territorial concessions, and President Zelensky rejects this because he cannot do it, he just can't. And then Trump might use it as a pretext to walk away from the whole process and to try to improve relations with Putin and Russia by developing, for example, economic ties or something like that. So this is my kind of biggest fear as of now. I hope to be wrong. I hope to believe that it's only kind of fear in my imagination. But so far, unfortunately, the developments are moving in this direction.
Have you been in touch with any of your colleagues in the Rada about what happened in Alaska?
Not yet. I'm reading, for example, on Facebook or on X, different opinions of experts, pundits, politicians, including Ukrainian. And from what I see, many people are concerned. Many people are shocked by this and, confused. Many people are confused. We don't know what to expect next. And so far, Putin has two wins, I would say. The first win, that unfortunately President Trump brought him from the cold of isolation because of this summit. And he didn't receive anything in exchange. So it was the first mistake and the first win for Putin. Second win, that President Trump has stopped even talking about severe consequences for Russia. And I don't see prospects that Trump, it seems to me that Trump is trying to avoid imposing sanctions on Russia and, for example, on China. So it's another win for Putin. And in any case, when the credibility of our biggest friend, our biggest ally is undermined, it's bad news for Ukraine and for Europe also. So at present moment, I don't know what is to be done to rectify the situation and to put it back on the right track.
I'll just, before we finish up here, I'll ask, it's a kind of looking into your crystal ball, as it were, but let's say that there is communication between President Zelensky and President Trump in the coming days, maybe even a face-to-face. and an unacceptable demand is made of Ukraine by Donald Trump under the influence of Putin or in collaboration with Putin. Where does Ukraine go from here if this rift develops between Donald Trump, the U.S. administration, and Ukraine?
First of all, we know that
prognosis.
we can rely only on ourselves, on our own efforts, on our army, first of all, on our people. We can also rely on our European partners, and hopefully they will be helping us to buy American weapons, which we desperately need, especially air defense systems like Patriot systems, to defend our cities and our civilian population. So we can, from what I see, we're lucky in this regard that we have reliable partners and allies in Europe. And we have to continue to work with Trump, with his administration. Luckily, there are still some people like Kellogg, for example, who to me seem pro-Ukrainian, and the fact that Russians demanded him not to include in the American delegation is very telling fact. The problem is that Trump had to succumb to this demand by Russians, and to me it was also unpleasant, and I don't understand why he did this. So there are still our friends in Washington, even I hope in the White House. So we have to continue to work with Trump, no matter how difficult it is. But what gives hope, very kind of weak maybe hope, that he didn't sound categorical, or he didn't sound as if he's insisting on territorial concessions, at present moment at least. I don't know whether the situation will change in the future or not. Yes, but at present, he didn't sound confident enough about this. So another sort of hope for me is that I noticed that when he talks to the European leaders, he might change his opinion. It doesn't mean that he cannot change it again under influence of talking to Putin or to Witkoff, but still, he can be convinced. I don't know for how long. And that's why I believe in the European diplomacy in this regard. There are, for example, European politicians like Secretary General of NATO, Rutte, who can handle Trump diplomatically. Keir Starmer is also a very talented diplomat when it comes to dealings with Trump. So, and there are also other European politicians who can be very helpful. So, luckily, we have this European solidarity around Ukraine, and we have hope that somehow we will manage to bring Trump on our side, on the right side of history.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Sir, thank you for your time. I appreciate you giving it to us and giving us your response. It's been a wonderful chat. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you found all or some of those interviews particularly insightful and useful for your understanding of this side of the equation, the pro-Ukrainian side of the equation when it comes to what happened in Alaska and the meeting between the leader of the free world and an indicted war criminal. Before we go, I would like to offer my perspective on what happened. And obviously, On the Edge is a very pro-Ukrainian channel, openly so. And so I found it to be a disgrace and shameful, quite frankly, to see a man who commits daily war crimes, who is an aggressor, who started this destructive war of his own volition and his own decision-making, to be welcomed and to be heaped praise upon by my president, did not sit well with me and does not sit well with me. I am concerned about what is going to happen next, obviously. Will Donald Trump try to force down the throats of the Ukrainians, something that would be unacceptable at the behest of the criminal in the Kremlin. I fear greatly that not only will this not shorten the war, but it could very well prolong it and make it even more devastating and tragic. I urge everyone who watches this program to continue to support Ukraine. There are dark days ahead, I fear. But by continuing to listen to Ukrainian voices, and there's no one Ukrainian voice, this is a sloppy, fledgling democracy, but there is one thing that nearly all Ukrainians agree upon, and that is bending the knee to Moscow again is unacceptable. So thank you for tuning in to this special episode of On the Edge, and we will return next week with more regular programming.